Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us for Fuse Calls today. Welcome.
Yeah, so happy to be on with you. I'm super excited about participating in Fuse this year. I love events that bring thought leaders in this format. I think it's a great way to tell the story, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. This was great. The brief conversation you and I had before we went live has been extraordinary, and so I really appreciate everything the team does to help us not only get our message across, but really help other companies do the same.
Yeah, and like I said offline, I really appreciate your energy. I just love it. You just got all this energy to you. So I'm going to feed off of that. I'm going to try to. So you're the co-founder of and CEO of Truman's, which, from what I can tell, is a very young business. Correct?
Yeah, we're super young. We announced what we were doing about a year ago, but that was well in advance of when we started selling to the public. So we only started selling on February 26th of this past year. So we're brand new from a sales perspective. But as I said, we've been telling our story for a while, and we thought that was an important part of our launch. We're really trying to shift the way the category works, and we're trying to shift the way consumers buy in the category. So we were very open and transparent early on, talking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, sharing some of our design philosophies, our branding strategies, looking for feedback in an authentic way. And so on one hand, it feels like we've been around for a while. Then on the other, we did just launch, and we're brand new to a lot of people. And so we're excited to tell the story.
So can you talk a little bit about the your ingenious patented refill cartridges that Truman's offers? I just came across this very recently. I think it was Andy LaMonica posted you guys, and I saw this video, and I just thought, oh wow, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, we're so appreciative of people like Andy who have shared our content and helped us tell our story. It's part of our strategy is to develop meaningful relationships with people, and those meaningful relationships have obviously translated to them helping us tell our story. And so we're super appreciative of that. We looked at the category home cleaning and asked a fundamental question, which is, in the age of people seeking out convenience, of e-commerce growing, why is it that the category is built to ship water? When you walk into a retail environment, what you see are ready-to-use bottles that are 98% water. That is not conducive to today's lifestyles that are based on convenience and e-commerce. And so we said there must be a better way to do it. There must be a more sustainable way that's much friendlier to the environment. And ultimately, we looked around and found that in businesses are actually using concentrate. So businesses aren't shipping hundreds of billions of pounds of water in big trucks all over the world. What they're doing is they're shipping the concentrates. And we saw a huge opportunity to take technology that exists, apply that in a different way to consumers in a different business model, and ultimately make something that's much more sustainable, much more user-friendly. And ultimately, in the end, the consumer wins because what they get is a far superior product in a much more convenient way. And so we're really trying to rethink the category. When you look at the fact that it takes 31 trucks to move ready-to-use product versus one truck of concentrates, you really start to imagine the supply chain burden. And so while we are a very green and environmentally friendly company, we are absolutely using innovative technology and intellectual property to make sure that we're offering the consumer the best experience possible in the way that has the least impact on the planet.
So it really sounds fantastic. I mean, and I love the idea, and I'm encouraging the listeners. What's the easiest way they can go to your website? To see the product.
Trumans.com is one of the best ways to interact with us, although we're vocal and active on every single platform. You can connect with us on Facebook. I personally respond to people on Twitter. So if you look at my activity on Twitter, I'm answering questions in real time, almost 24/7. But Trumans.com is where you can buy our product and have access to basically everything that you can imagine as it relates to having fun in cleaning. And I know that sometimes that's kind of an odd combination, but we're trying to be a lighthearted approach in a category that has become obnoxiously dull.
Yeah. And just so people who may be listening who aren't familiar, you guys came up with this. It's called refill cartridges, and essentially it's for cleaning, home cleaning, glass, countertops, floors, wood, what have you. There's 4 or 5 different refills, and you send 4 bottles, and that's it. So people are not constantly rebuying plastic bottles, they're purchasing this refill container.
Yeah, and that's part of the dirty secret in the category. You know, you look at the category today, and what you see are specialty cleaners in every aisle. You walk down the mass of ready-to-use product of bottles that are 98% water, and you see specialized cleaners for granite or specialized cleaners for wood or stainless steel. And what we're saying is there are fundamentally 4 formulas that you need for your entire house. That's it. And frankly, if you keep up with cleaning, you do not need to use toxic cleaners. You can use non-toxic cleaners that work just as well. So here's what we're saying. You only need 4 cleaners for your entire home. These formulas are designed to work optimally in the kitchen, in the bathroom, with floors, and with glass cleaner. We ship you in bulk, so we send them in 4 packs. So a consumer gets a starter kit, which contains 4 products. It's 4 empty bottles that they reuse over time. And then we simply ship the refills. And the refills are sold in 4 packs. And that's a very, very, very important part of the story, because what we do not want is consumers buying individual refills and having the mailman show up every single day of the week. That is too much of a drain on the supply chain. So we ship in bulk. We explain the importance of having product on hand. You don't run out. We keep the cost extraordinarily low by having a simple supply chain. And as I said, ultimately the consumer and the planet win. But, you know, fundamentally, when you look at cupboards and shelves, you see a lot of different toxic products. There are 30 to 40 different products that claim to clean your home. You only need 4. And that's part of our story. We're simplifying it. We're taking the clutter out of cleaning, and we're really exposing the dirty secret that exists, which is there's not a lot of transparency. There's a lot of markup with needless products. And so we're basically reducing a direct and open, transparent conversation with people.
So you're talking, well, I got a couple of other questions, but before we go on to the next one though, this idea of becoming sustainable, was this, you know, prior to you coming up with this idea, were you looking at that space? I mean, why the cleaning space? How did you kind of get into this? Is this always been part of your background, or did you just want to kind of create a breakthrough product? What's the story there?
You know, it's a really great question, and it's multifaceted, and there are a lot of different directions of it. But from the environmental standpoint, you know, I spent a lot of my career at GE, and GE was one of the greatest thought leaders as it relates to eco. And they had a huge program, Eco Imagination. A great friend of mine worked on that to develop it. And I always had deep respect for GE and its desire to really rethink a lot of different categories, manufacturing processes, and make it much more environmentally friendly. I left GE and went in to run a company called Big Ass Fans. And what I learned there was the massive drain on our planet based in warehouses and distribution centers, all of these huge facilities that were using these big fans. And so as I got to know the supply chain, which is a lot of manufacturing facilities, a lot of distribution centers and warehouses that were using our product, the reason why they're using big ass fans was because it was a huge energy drain. And so when I left the company, I was always a fan of cleaning, and that's the other side of it, is that I've always loved the category. In fact, I've known an individual who runs a cleaning chemical company for 15 years. I've served as an informal advisor. So I've been attached to the industry, but it was the merging of these concepts of really understanding the environmental impact, being at a stage in my career where I knew that I could take innovation and do this in a sustainable way, build a team that can help us really go up against the big cleaning companies who are not making the best decisions for consumers or the planet. And so a lot of different reasons of why now, but we saw a huge opportunity. I think even in the category, there's a huge opportunity for brand. So from a branding perspective, there's opportunity. From a design perspective, there's opportunity. And from a sustainability perspective, tremendous opportunity. And I mentioned just e-commerce alone. It does not make sense to ship anything that's more than 90% water. And the idea that you would ship a bottle across the country and expect it to leak or not break is insane. And so we want to be on the forefront. We want to lead the charge for companies to think in a different way. We want to lead the charge for consumers to stand up and ask fundamental questions. Why are they buying product that is causing such a drain on the supply chain? And we think we can be an inspiration. We think we can shift the industry, but it is the sum of all parts that have kind of brought us to Truman's and why we're doing it and why we're so passionate. It's a phase where we're more passionate about disrupting the industry than we are about actually making money with the company. We really want to shift the way companies behave.
It's great. It's great, John. And like I said at the beginning, I really feel that energy. real quick, who came up with the cartridge idea? Whose brainchild was that? Was that you, or was that?
No, that's a concept that was developed several years ago. In fact, I received the first prototype back when I was at GE 10 years ago. As I mentioned, I've been an informal advisor of this company. So our investor, our partner in this business, developed the IP, and so we're in partnership with that individual. And it's something that we hope the market uses. We do not look at this and say this is a Truman's only thing. We hope 100% of the market converts to concentrates. We know there are different forms of concentrates. Some individuals like pods. We personally don't like pods because they're not childproof. And I have 2 kids at home, an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old. So for us, efficacy matters and child safety matters. So look, the number one thing is we want people to use concentrates. Then beyond that, we hope they like our form factor and they like our design. And that's why we have intellectual property associated with it, because it works really, really well on a lot of different levels. But, we're, as I said, we're here to change the industry, and it's less about Truman's and more about sharing a message that just makes sense.
That's really great and very inspirational. There's this long list of environmental challenges that, your invention here, your innovation is addressing. There's plastics everywhere, filling up our oceans, our soil, and as I was researching even our bodies, I guess I shouldn't be surprised at that, but there's plastic in the air, there's plastic everywhere. What concerns you the most? When you're trying to kind of you're changing the game here, but there's also this conscientiousness going on. What really concerns you the most? Is there anything we should be most aware of?
It's a great question. I think what concerns me is no action. And what concerns me is that people simply want to do things that are not great for the planet. And what I consider that is going in, buying a toxic cleaner that's filled with water. I think there are multiple categories. I think windshield washer fluid is another category we're not participating in. So it's often easier for me to talk about that than a category that's directly related to us. But there are a lot of different categories that people are making terrible decisions because that's all that's available. And companies aren't stepping up and saying, we're going to do a better job for the planet. So the challenge in cleaning is so complex. And, there are so many different layers of it. We really see Truman's as a first step. We fundamentally do not believe that we have solved it. We know that it is an iterative process. This is phase 1. This is step 1. And we've got a long way to go. And when you think about the challenges in the category, you have toxicity. There are a lot of people who buy toxic products. Terrible for the planet, terrible for the individual. So on one hand, we could spend an hour talking about the terrible aspects of toxic cleaners in the environment and for the human body. Then there's the plastic conundrum. That in itself is an issue. Now, our refills, when you look at a ready-to-use bottle versus a refill, it's a 96% plastic reduction. But the reality is that plastic is a material that's okay to use, and you have to look at it holistically. That's a whole nother set of challenges, how you reduce plastic and then eventually migrate out of it. Supply chain, I've talked a lot about the fact that there's a huge burden on our supply chain. Not enough people are looking holistically at it. We get asked a lot of times, why aren't we using glass versus plastic? There are studies done that over the life of a product, if you used plastic versus glass, it's a huge debate over which is more burdensome to the environment. So it's really complex. What keeps us up at night is the worry that people won't take that first step with us, because that's what we believe we're doing. We're taking the first step. And it's an iterative process. And so once we all take that first step together, if we can convert people from buying ready-to-use product to concentrates, that's the first step. Then we can move and move and move until the point at which we have a sustainable solution. But that's why we've priced our product in parity or at parity with competitors who are commoditized price. Because as I said, this isn't about high margin opportunity. This is about actually shifting the way the category works. So we knew we had to make it accessible from a price standpoint, accessible from a free shipping standpoint. We know that there are a lot of challenges, and if you price it too high, if you make it too complex, you're not going to actually get people to move. And so that frankly, it's a great question, but my biggest concern is not taking that step with us.
Makes a lot of sense because, being a creative professional myself, I've had millions of phenomenally wonderful ideas and very few that have taken root. I probably could come up with 100 ideas right here with you. And I've learned over time, it's really the ones that are thought through and the ones that take are the ones that matters. And that's a whole different process from the creative process. But
yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So I was researching Truman's. I came across the Loop Initiative, which I wasn't familiar with before I started taking a look at you guys. So maybe we should explain what the Loop Initiative is for the people who aren't familiar as well. And then maybe you could tell us where a startup like Truman's fits in the mix next to like a Unilever and P&G within the Loop Initiative.
Yeah, so basically, here's what the Loop Initiative is, really simplified. It's the idea that a company would ship you a product. You would use the material, the solution, whatever the consumable is in that product, and then you'd send the actual physical carrying case back, and they would reuse that in the manufacturing process as part of a loop with the package. So for example, if you're using deodorant, you would get a stick of deodorant, you would use up the consumable, you would ship the actual case back, they would refill it and send it back to you. That's the concept of loop. Okay. Here's our opinion on that. I think loop is a great process, but one of the realities of shipping is dimension weight. And so I use the example of a windshield washer fluid or a ready-to-use bottle of cleaner.
Right.
To ship that to you, whether it's filled with water or not. Now, there gets into logistics of, is it more fuel? And absolutely, it's more fuel if it's filled. But fundamentally, there's real cost associated with shipping a big bottle. With us, we are shipping small refills. And so when you think about the ability to get those products back, what matters is the size of the product you're actually shipping. So if I were to ship a ready-to-use bottle versus a refill back, clearly in a loop process, what makes the most sense is the smaller version of it. So we're bullish on it from the perspective of companies actually decreasing the size of their packaging. We think the loop can work. But fundamentally, you've got to build manufacturing processes that support that. And I talked about opting in. That's a huge step for customers to make. And so while we actually are building the capability of loop, we know that it's a leap to say to someone, take all of your packaging and send it back, even if we're paying for it. And by the way, we've even offered consumers who do not have the ability to recycle in their municipalities that we'll take it back and we'll recycle it on their behalf. And that's a huge leap for them. Their reply to us is, sorry, would rather not have to deal with it. Yeah. And so loop works in theory. I think where loop gets really challenging is it requires a shift in consumer behavior. And that fundamentally goes back to your previous question, which is what's the biggest fear? The biggest fear is not taking the first step. Here's what we think. If we can actually get them taking that first step, loop is much easier on the second step.
Right.
Much, much easier. Yeah. And so we think over time, loop makes sense. As I said, we're actively engaged in reusing product from a testing perspective. We haven't sold a reused product yet, but we're absolutely, for example, I have the ability to use reused product in my house. We're not making it commercially available yet, but we're actively testing it. And we believe that that's a viable path in the future.
Yeah, I imagine incentivizing that is really a challenge. I mean, just the everyday Joe on the street is not thinking, oh yeah, let me take some time out, go through all my plastics and ship them back to the guys. Like it is. I could see that. It's nice in theory, but it seems like there would need to be some type of incentive program for that. Yeah.
They're also, so not only does there need to be an incentive program, but when you think about the economics, we as businesses, we have supply chain leaders and thought leaders have built an optimized model that goes from a factory through the distribution network to the home. The idea that you'll be able to somehow consolidate it from homes back is really hard to get your head around from a cost perspective, because just back of the napkin math would suggest going from homes back to the factory is more expensive than the optimal way out. So you're already at a disadvantage. And so what we're working to do is hopefully find the most optimal way. That's why we think having this direct relationship will allow us to do that, going direct from Trumans.com to consumers. Hopefully that direct relationship allows us to then make the loop easier. But when you start including retailers and you start including other steps, it becomes extraordinarily difficult. Now, one thing that we're doing is we're going from our factory directly to home. So we're bypassing and skipping the expensive warehouses and distribution centers that I mentioned. And so, that's part of the story, is skipping those steps. And part of making Loop work is skipping all the things associated with it that would increase costs on the way back.
So let's just say, hypothetically, let's say you guys are booming success and you start to scale up. Do you then just create more factories, or do you ever hit a point? I mean, like best case scenario, right? You're booming. Do you ever hit this point where you have to kind of start to rely on storage and storehouses and this type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the beautiful part of creating a product that's so small, and the form factor is so light. You look at our factory today, we can scale up to being a $60 million plus business in this small little footprint that we have allocated today. We can double or triple that business with just a little bit of additional work. And so, the small footprint allows for tremendous scale, and scale in a way that is very easy to achieve in a very cost-effective manner. And I bring up cost-effective because, as I said, what's important is having a price that's accessible to the average person. So we can grow the business extraordinarily fast in a very meaningful way with a very small footprint. Our manufacturing line is super small. The need to store product is small. As I mentioned, 31 trucks of ready-to-use product versus 1 of concentrates. So you can then imagine how much smaller the total footprint has to be. So we're really optimistic that we've got a path to grow. We know in partnership with our strategic investor and supplier that we understand what scale looks like on a global level. And I can tell you, our growth plans, we think will be in the UK by next year. We have tremendous inbound interest from the UK. One of our largest fan bases outside the US is in the UK. So we see tremendous opportunity within our existing footprint. And that's hopefully part of the story that we're telling. I'm speaking at a lot of supply chain events this year, and the message we want to get across is when you actually create a simpler supply chain, less of a footprint, not only are you doing better for the environment, but it's much more scalable and make it much easier for the consumer to interact with you.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. And that tells me it's simple enough. So.
Yeah, we think so. And look, I mean, this is also, where we say we think that products need to be thought through in a much more holistic manner, and the design needs to extend not only from the ideation phase, but all the way to the consumer. And when you think about planet-centered design, planet-centered innovation, planet-centered supply chain, this is the perfect example of it. And I think the only thing that's holding us back are companies that are so asset heavy that they can't move fast enough to get out of their own way, or they rely on their assets and can't move. But we're really excited. We want to inspire, as I said, the companies to think differently, new companies to be created to think differently, and then inspire people to buy the product and get to know us and rethink the category.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. At Fuse, we talk a lot about brand and design in conjunction. It looks as though Truman's has a product design that is poised to become synonymous with its brand. Do you agree? I mean, these cartridges, I mean, instantly remembered. I just saw that video and I saw the spray bottle and I was like, oh, that it just makes a lot of sense. So do you agree with this? Are there other Truman product ideas in the pipeline?
One is I think there are going to be other product ideas in the pipeline. And what I would say is what we built is a brand first. I think that we built a brand and a persona that people really can love, and a narrative that I think is approachable and fills a void in the category. So I look at our design aesthetic as an aesthetic that can extend well beyond what you see today. Now, with that said, I think what's important is every single product you have should tie into the broader narrative and should tie into your design strategy. So it's awesome to hear that you look at the current products as they exist today and believe that they fit into the Truman's ecosystem. But, I think that's just a classic example of amazing design. And we applaud the folks who helped pull it together with the vision. And we had a very tight narrative that we wanted to follow. And we didn't want to be too idealistic, and we didn't want to be too we wanted to be very authentic.
So like too grandiose or too
we wanted it to be very real, and we wanted you to look at it and say, this is a company that's talking to me, and it's design that's talking to me, and every single element is approachable. And it was actually a really tough challenge, because you're taking intellectual property, you're taking a design that is pretty technical in itself, but you're also trying to make it approachable. And you're talking about sophisticated things like the supply chain and saving energy and saving costs, but you're trying to simplify it in a way that someone can understand. And so it's oftentimes hard to figure out what you don't want to be. It's easier to say what we do want to be, which is, super authentic and approachable, and something that, people look at and feel something towards. And you look at our design, specifically the bottles, and it evokes an emotion. The experience of actually dispersing the chemical throughout the water when you first mix it is something that's become a delightful event. And, that's also part of the story, getting someone to actually make a decision to embrace something and embrace a new design, a new form factor. And so, I'm super appreciative of that. And what we set out to do is make something that's a reflection of ourselves and try to be as open and authentic about it as possible. And I think that's probably why you caught me so off guard with the question, because, I look at it and say, we're trying to be very real with it. And we're trying to be very open with it.
Yeah.
And we're sitting in a room studying different brand aspects. We just kind of allowed it to form in a very natural way.
So that's great. Well, it just, for me, my own experience, take it for what it's worth. It really fell into place. So I think you're really onto something. One of our main initiatives at Fuse this year is to leave something behind for future generations of designers. Or maybe entrepreneurs. I know entrepreneurs and creative folks have a lot in common. What advice might you give to a design student who's just starting out?
Yeah, well, I think design students have an extraordinary opportunity. I think we are the perfect case study to show that design can make something more sustainable. And when I say sustainable, I don't necessarily mean just environmentally sustainable. I think we can build a wildly successful business that really shifts the industry, and it's because of really good design. And so when designers oftentimes think of design, what often happens is you think of a CEO who says, you're adding cost to my business. I would challenge them to think in a different way. I would challenge them to say, how can you create design that offers the ability to create a more sustainable business, a business that can really shift the industry, that can make people rethink the way products work? I think that's what we have an extraordinary opportunity to do. Design isn't just simply about making something more expensive or increasing the margin rate. Design can be about changing industries. And I think design pushed in the right direction, pushing the limits, asking fundamental questions about, why are we shipping water? Can we design it in a different way? How can we make the user experience so convenient that we can make adoption easy? Every single bit of our product, every single aspect was thought through from a design perspective in a way that laddered up to our brand. And that's what ultimately designers have the chance to do in almost every category we see. I hope that a designer is inspired to rethink the windshield washer fluid category. That's a category that I can't wait to see disrupted. And it bothers me every single time I go to a gas station that I see those big jugs being poured out in a car, then thrown out on site, and they end up in a landfill. And that just makes no sense to me. And so, I think this is where designers can start re-looking at categories, reimagining them. They're ultimately building the world that they're going to live in. And so this is a huge opportunity to just go out, find categories, be disruptive, and use design as the differentiator that really ultimately helps the company win.
So since we're talking about legacy, we're talking about the future. My next question is about, this is the 100th anniversary of the Bauhaus School, which was created, in Germany during the Industrial Revolution. And I've asked all of the folks I've interviewed this year about just reflecting on what design looked like back then versus today. So, this is a bit of a different discussion, talking to you than the rest of the folks I've spoken to. When I was thinking about Truman's, what you guys have put on the market, it just makes me think of the things we celebrated in the 20th century, gasoline and industrializing everything, and plastics. I mean, plastics is huge. It seems like the 21st century is going to be more about rectifying the problems we created in the 20th century. I mean, do you agree with this? What's your take on this?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you're talking about a economy that was built on a throwaway society, and the idea that we basically used up products, threw it away, and that was it. And so, we all have our work to do, and what's challenging about it is that it's a mess in so many different ways. It's an extraordinary mess, and so we've got to unwind it. The biggest challenge we face are the bad mistakes that we've made in the past. Right now, as I said, we're shipping ready-to-use product because that was perceived to be more convenient. We're shipping a lot of different products with heavy toxicity because that was perceived to be okay. It's unwinding that and expecting consumers to behave differently. That's the biggest challenge. And so, I think we have evolved. I do not think it's as easy as we're in the reuse phase today, because that's simply not true. There's $30 billion worth of ready-to-use single-use product in my category that's sold every single year. And, on Twitter, I see a lot of criticism that people should just use vinegar as an example. It's unrealistic to think that the market is going to turn into using vinegar because it's the most sustainable way. And so what we've got to do as a group is to say, to realistically lean in to the phase we're at. And I just simply think this is a phase about being smarter about what we do. This is a phase of, it's not about reuse. It's not about kind of throwing it away. It's about just being smart and admitting where we are, having an open discussion about where we are. And as I said, taking that first step. For me, I personally think this is the first step phase, because we've got to correct all these terrible decisions that we've made. And it's going to take us a while to back out of it.
Wow. Well, I would say you're definitely walking the walk, John, and it's been great talking to you. And like I said, I really love your energy, and thanks for bringing.
Awesome. Well, the other really cool thing is, my 8-year-old made a cameo, so hopefully people got to see that.
I saw a little head pop in there.
He's on spring break today, and one of my favorite parts of building the company is building it for people like him, because there he is. So we know. Part of the thing that is so important for me is to think about kids and 8-year-olds. And, he's a great example. When I go into a retail store, oftentimes I show him the mistakes that are made, and really hope that, as we're building companies for the future, we're thinking about people like Evan, my 8-year-old, and my 3-year-old. And, we really want people to think in different ways, because ultimately we're doing all of this for them, and we're making better decisions. You talked about the phases of design. They're the ones who are going to be living with our decisions that we make in the phase. And so hopefully by the time, Evan is old enough to do what I'm doing, he can rethink it in a completely different way and make it even more sustainable. So, really, really appreciate your time. And, I'm actually so glad Evan got to be a part of it. He loves to listen to me. He loves to listen to me do these things. So I'm appreciative of that.
It's really great. So I'm a father of 3. And talk about just living in a different generation. I know my father talking about change. He worked 35 years for DuPont, creating fluorocarbons. Sorry, and that stuff put me through college. So it's a different time for sure. But just having this interview, and I love kids. Absolutely, I'm obsessed with my kids. So I love that Evan popped his head in there.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it too. There he is again.
Hey, Evan.
Say hi, Ev. Say hi.
There's the bunny ears. So
Awesome.
it's been great. Thanks so much, John. And we will see you at Fuse. Evan,
Awesome.
you want to send us off, Evan? Say goodbye.
Say goodbye, bud.
Bye.
See you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.